Princess Anne is in hospital with concussion tonight after apparently being injured by a horse. The princess, who's 73, was walking on her estate in Gloucestershire yesterday when the incident happened. A man goes on trial accused of plotting to kidnap, rape and murder the TV presenter Holly Willoughby. England are through to the last 16 at the Euros, but fans in Germany say they're hoping for a more convincing performance when they play Slovenia tomorrow.
Is he still feeling confident?
Oh, come on.
That's a trick question.
Yes, 100%.
I'm here in Belfast looking at whether the political landscape might change in this general election. Also, how much more tax might we be paying? The main parties are accused of a conspiracy of silence over their election proposals.
A scathing assessment from key economic experts about the major parties' tax and spend plans and what they're not telling voters.
And the issues that matter to you. We speak to a mother who got in touch over the lack of support for carers.
On BBC London, shocked to find a cannabis farm in his home. How criminals are posing as tenants to grow illegal drugs inside people's houses.
Hello, good evening. Princess Anne is in hospital with concussion tonight after apparently being injured by a horse while walking on her estate in Gloucestershire yesterday. Buckingham Palace says the princess, who's 73, is expected to make a full recovery but is likely to remain in hospital for some days. A working trip to Canada planned for later this week has been postponed. Here's our senior royal correspondent, Daniela Relf.
Just over a week ago, trooping the colour, the Princess Royal was on horseback, where she loved to be. An accomplished horsewoman, she played a leading part in the event. But last night, Princess Anne was injured on her estate, Gatcombe Park in Gloucestershire. She was hurt after coming into contact with a horse's head or legs while on a walk. The princess was taken by ambulance to Southmead Hospital in Bristol, where she's now in a comfortable condition. It's understood she hasn't yet been able to recall the details of what happened. In a statement, Buckingham Palace said, "The Princess Royal has sustained minor injuries and concussion following an incident on the Gatcombe Park estate yesterday evening. The King has been kept closely informed and joins the whole royal family in sending his fondest love and well wishes to the Princess for a speedy recovery." Year on year, Princess Anne tops the list of royals who carry out the most public engagements. Her work is often under the radar, without the glamour and attention others receive. But in a year where the royal family has faced serious health issues, her contribution has been more important than ever. Especially her support for her older brother. Their closeness and his appreciation of his sister have become more obvious since he became king.
Princess Anne's accident just adds to the depleted number of full-time working royals at the moment. These have been challenging months, but there are now real gaps in terms of who can carry out public duties.
Princess Anne is notoriously keen to avoid a fuss at all costs. But her injuries mean her engagements this week have been postponed, including a trip to Canada. She's likely to remain in hospital until later this week.
And Daniela is with me. And as you suggest, this is someone with a full diary. Her absence is really going to be noticed.
That's right. That absence will absolutely be noticeable because, as you say, Jane, of the sheer number of engagements that she does on behalf of the royal family. We don't always see what Princess Anne has been doing widely reported, but it is a significant amount. Just this week, she was due to be in Scotland, in Hampshire, and as you said earlier, in Canada as well, all of which has now been postponed. So these remain tricky times for the royal family. We're now in a situation where we have the King, whose diary is being very carefully managed because of his cancer treatment. The Princess of Wales is still largely out of the public eye because of her own cancer diagnosis. Her husband, the Prince of Wales, is stepping up his public engagements a little bit, but it's clear that his wife's recovery is his priority, and now Princess Anne also out of action. So limitations on 4 of the most high-profile senior members of the royal family. We're heading into a quieter time over the summer, but this is still a challenge for a royal family that wants and needs to be visible.
Daniela, thank you very much for now. Daniela Ralph. Now, let's turn to the general election. For more on that, let's go to Rita in Belfast. Rita.
Jane, we are here in the iconic Titanic Quarter, which celebrates the city's proud shipbuilding past and which has become a monument to lessons learned from the tragedy. In a moment, we'll be looking at how the political landscape in Northern Ireland is changing and at what that means for people's priorities as they cast their vote in the general election. But first, the UK's main political parties have ducked addressing some of the stark choices over tax and spend in their manifestos. That is according to the leading think tank, the Institute for Fiscal Studies. Our economics editor, Faisal Islam, is here with me. Harsh words from them, Faisal.
Yes, Rita, we've had several hundred pages of manifesto ideas, but the IFS say, well, we haven't had a clear plan on what levels of taxation will be, just some promises about tax rates on public services, some ideas of what's going wrong in some public services, but not a clear plan for their funding. And on the more general issue of where plans are for the size of the state, no clear idea about whether the state needs to be bigger or smaller. So some vague plans. But what about the public? Do they deserve to know better? That's the big message from the IFS. 10 days out from the election, we are now in a position to be able to compare the main parties' big offers, their promises to the electorate in the manifestos with the help of the Institute for Fiscal Studies. First, the size of the manifesto in tax and spend terms. This chart compares all the cash into the exchequer, so tax rises and spending cuts above the line, and the reverse below the line. Conservatives say they want about £30 billion of cash into the exchequer, like squeezing benefits, with the same amount out, including that national insurance cut. Labour's plans are half as big, targeting health and schools measures and green investment funded by smaller tax rises, for example on private schools. The Lib Dems and Greens are pushing for better resourced public services funded by significant tax rises, and Reform thinks it can shrink government and taxes radically. So how does all that affect tax? This is a chart since the Second World War of all the tax as a percentage of the size of the economy. You can see the rough pattern here. The Lib Dems and Labour would take this tax burden to the highest level since 1948. The Conservatives would stabilise it at the highest level since 1950. But the big picture is that all the parties would leave intact this rise in the tax burden we've seen over the past Parliament, this Parliament of emergencies, the pandemic and the energy crisis, and it wouldn't really fall. So why all this talk about spending cuts when the tax burden is doing that? Well, the Conservatives say they do want to spend more on defence, Labour on schools, but the real mystery here is about what's happening in unprotected departments, important spending on councils, courts, higher education, for example. There, we are not being told the full story.
We're either going to see some big tax increases or some spending cuts, given where we are with the public finances at the moment. And honestly, we don't know which way either party would go post-election. Neither of them want to say we're going to cut this. Neither of them want to say we're going to increase taxes here. But if they're going to keep to their own self-imposed fiscal discipline, they're likely to have to do one or the other.
The PM responded today by saying his plans are fully costed and will deliver tax cuts at every age. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said Labour's plans were about growing the economy after 14 years of flatlining. The Lib Dems also said their plans were fully costed, and the Greens, in a BBC Panorama interview, said their big plans to grow spending were not out of the ordinary internationally.
You're promising things that can't be delivered.
Well, and I've quoted to you what other experts have said, welcoming our proposals, other economists, financial experts who've said the Green Party is bringing in a different way of thinking that by European standards is actually fairly normal, and we can't expect to have the level of health services, the quality of education system that other countries have if we don't put the investment in that's needed.
We aren't getting a full picture from any of these parties' manifesto, but you get a sense of the instincts on tax and spend and on the size of government going forward. But it is worth remembering that the experience of the past 5 years is that when the economic waters get choppy, many of these grand plans get dumped in the deep sea.
Faisal Islam there. And if you want to hear more of Nick Robinson's interview with Adrian Ramsey, you can watch the whole discussion along with all the other leader interviews on the BBC iPlayer. Rishi Sunak has said that he's not aware of any other Conservative candidates being looked at by the Gambling Commission over allegations of bets being placed on the election date. He also confirmed that the party was conducting its own internal inquiry. 4 Conservatives, including 2 candidates, are being investigated by the gambling watchdog. And the Prime Minister is coming under increasing pressure over his handling of the matter. Here's our political editor, Chris Mason.
Rishi Sunak on the campaign trail in London tonight. This is a church hall in so often true blue Chelsea.
Friends, we have urgent work to do. We have 10 days to save Britain from a Labour government.
Mr Sunak defensive in his arguments and defensive in his geography, where he's visiting, as poll after poll suggests a Labour government is imminent and so many Conservatives are vulnerable. The Prime Minister in Chelsea, of all places, trying to focus his arguments on what he sees as the dangers of a Labour government and turn the page from all of those questions about the betting saga. Earlier, he was at the Sun newspaper for a question and answer session which began with the saga about alleged betting on the timing of the general election. He said the Conservative Party was also looking into it, as well as the gambling regulator.
In parallel, we have been conducting internal inquiries. These are very sensitive matters. They have to be done in a way that doesn't compromise the integrity of police and other investigations.
You see what this looks like to readers, to voters, to the public. It looks like the last days of Rome.
Harry, as I said, I share absolutely in people's... I'm as angry as anybody when I learnt about these things.
The Prime Minister also made this claim of the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer about people crossing the Channel in small boats.
I can tell you now, they are queuing up in Calais waiting for a Starmer government so they can come here and stay here.
Oh,
like, that is the choice.
800.
Nearly 13,000 people have crossed the Channel so far this year, a higher number than at this point in any of the last 4 years. Sir Keir said the current system was a failure.
There are 50,000 people here not being processed. If we carry on with Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister, it will get to 100,000 by the end of the year. They're not being processed. The one thing we know if you're not processed is you can't be returned anywhere. So you're staying here. Who's paying for the accommodation for those 50,000? You are. Who's paying the hotel bills? You are. Are we going to do this forever? This is such an absurd position.
There's a final set-piece moment for the 2 men hoping to be Prime Minister on BBC One on Wednesday night, as this campaign approaches its final stages.
And we can talk to Chris in Westminster now. Chris, in the last hour or so, the gambling row, the regulator has had more to say.
Yeah, that's right, Rita. So the whole row has chugged on today, not least because the opponent parties to the Conservatives have kept talking about it. So we've seen Sir Ed Davey of the Liberal Democrats suggesting that Rishi Sunak hasn't been doing enough. And then the actions of the Labour Party. So over the weekend, the Labour Party wrote to the Gambling Commission, the regulator, suggesting that the names that the Commission were looking into should be made public. Tonight we've had a response from the Gambling Commission in which they have said they won't be naming those that they are looking into, and also they have said they have asked those they're looking into to treat the matter confidentially, which gives you some insight into why it's quite difficult for reporters like me and others to bring you more names of those who might be being looked into. I've spent much of the last few days trying to do that, and frankly it has not proved particularly easy, not least because, as I say, the Gambling Commission suggesting that those being looked into do not comment publicly. But what I've been reporting over the last 24 hours is there are more that are being looked into than those names that are already out there, and so every prospect, even if this isn't making the headlines that it was a couple of days ago, that we've not heard the end of it.
Chris, thank you. Chris Mason there in Westminster. Well, in Northern Ireland, the focus is not on the main British political parties, but on parties which have reflected the central historical fault line in politics here. Unionism, those who want to see Northern Ireland remain part of the UK, is currently dominated by the Democratic Unionist Party, or DUP, who had 8 seats in Westminster at the last election. The dominant force among nationalists who want to see Northern Ireland united with the Republic of Ireland is Sinn Féin, who had 7 seats, while the SDLP had 2. There's also the Alliance Party, here in yellow, which remains neutral on the issue. But the debate in this part of the UK has also been strongly affected by the issue of Brexit. Northern Ireland voted to remain in the EU, and it's the only part of the UK to share a land border with an EU state, Ireland. Since the referendum, the Alliance Party has grown significantly. It's pro-Remain, and it's strongly challenging the pro-Leave DUP in some of their strongholds. Our correspondent Chris Page looks now at how these two thorny issues, Northern Ireland's place in the UK and its place in the EU, could be changing the face of politics here.
The Brexit journey has taken Northern Ireland in a different direction to the rest of the UK, and the final destination is still uncertain. At this music festival, people say there have been years of political disharmony since the referendum.
There was a lot of misinformation that maybe led to a vote that people didn't want.
Northern Ireland really isn't capitalising on the position that we're in, being the link between the UK and the rest of Europe. I feel like that's been a completely wasted opportunity.
Northern Ireland's in the unique position of having full access to the EU and British markets. But there's also been a trade border in the Irish Sea, checks on goods arriving here from Great Britain. That led the Democratic Unionist Party to veto the formation of a power-sharing devolved government for 2 years, until a new agreement 4 months ago.
It's not a job done, but it's significant work progress, and we're going to build on that in the future.
8 years ago today, the Brexit referendum result was declared, a result the DUP welcomed at the time. There are those who will say Brexit's fundamentally damaged the Union.
The people chose what they wish to see the future of this country being. It was delivered for Great Britain. It has not been delivered for Northern Ireland, and in that respect, democracy has been dishonoured.
Another pro-Brexit party, the traditional Unionist Voice, is accusing the DUP of compromising too much. But Unionists who opposed Brexit say they've been proved right.
Brexit purists, they haven't got the Brexit they wanted. That's the problem. But the Brexit they wanted could never be delivered. The whole cohesion of the Union has been damaged because of Brexit. But the Irish Sea border needs to go.
Irish nationalists ultimately want to remove another border, the land frontier with the Republic of Ireland. They argue that most people in Northern Ireland would want to rejoin the EU, and Irish unity is the only way to do it.
I don't think it's likely, given the political context, particularly in England, that any government will rejoin the European Union. I genuinely believe that'll be very difficult to get back into the European Union as full members while we're still part of the UK.
In recent years, Sinn Féin has become the first nationalist party to win the most seats in councils and the devolved assembly. It says Brexit has caused too much blockage.
People want to see us move forward. People want to see that strong leadership. People want to see the positive change in their communities.
Unionists say they want to work with the next Westminster government to remove any remaining trade barriers between here and the rest of the UK. Are you prepared to work with them in that?
We will work with anybody to at the end of the day to eradicate any barriers there may be. But as we said from the outset of Brexit, Brexit was always going to mean friction. Brexit was always going to mean barriers and new borders.
Brexit has arguably increased the focus on constitutional issues, but the party, which is neither unionist nor nationalist, has grown strongly.
Alliance isn't advocating for a united Ireland or for the United Kingdom. What we're advocating for is the best possible outcome for Northern Ireland. I believe that closer alignment between the UK and the EU is best for Northern Ireland. I also believe it has benefits for the rest of Ireland and the rest of the UK.
Concert goers suggest historical identity politics is weakening.
issues matter. Education's always very important in the economy, so we're getting to real politics here in Northern Ireland.
Elections show which way politics is moving. In Northern Ireland, perspectives are shifting, not least because of Brexit. Chris Page, BBC News, Belfast.
Now, throughout this election, we've been asking you to get in touch with us to tell us what issues you would like us to cover through your voice, your vote. Jacqueline Wood, who lives 10 miles from here in Lisbon, contacted us about the issue of support for those caring for people with learning difficulties. Coletta Smith went to meet her.
Hello, Jacqueline.
Hello, Coletta. Sometimes the quietest people can have the most powerful voices. Jacqueline's one of them, a full-time carer for her daughter Emma, who has special needs.
She knows everywhere. She's just a wonderful person.
Do you want
to say hello to Coletta?
Why did you contact us?
Because absolutely nobody is talking about the learning disabled.
Jacqueline only gets half her allocated hours of home support because of a constant battle for staff.
They're the most vulnerable people in society from the day they're born until the day they die. And they have to put them into a special category and pay a special category salary to the people who are doing such a good job caring for them. If they don't do that, they will never solve the problem.
Jacqueline's knitted a support network of other carers and families around her, but they're all struggling with the local respite centre closed at the moment.
Having a baldy, why we come bottom of the list. I think other things just seem to get priority.
The trust in charge told us they are working to provide local respite care again, but it can't come soon enough for Beth, in her 80s, who cares for her sister Jenny.
We carers are saving the government a mint of money over the years. You know, and I think they should be producing the goods to help.
My biggest heartache is that Emma has nowhere to go when I die. The politicians in Westminster and in all the devolved assemblies have been weighed in the balance and they've been found wanting. I don't know how they look in the mirror.
This election, Jacqueline and her friends are hoping someone will hear their voices and support them in daily life.
What we all say is the sun rises and we get up with it, and you get through that day.
Do you like the water? I love it. And Coletta is with me. Stories of such anxiety and concern there, Coletta. What are the political parties saying they'll do about it?
Well, you can understand the frustration for Jacqueline and millions of carers right the way across the UK to have heard such little detail about what support or provisions will be potentially put in place for those who care for people with special needs. There is broad agreement across the political parties that the system is struggling to cope at the moment and needs major reform. The Liberal Democrats have promised a rise in that minimum wage for carers to try and solve the recruitment crisis that we were hearing about there. The Labour Party have promised to consider something similar, but of course funding for respite or daycare centres here is a devolved issue. That means it's up to the Stormont political parties to decide how much to spend, where to spend it. But actually in the Westminster election now, it's the same political parties that are standing here who are in power in Stormont. So for voters here, they're still trying to hold those same politicians' feet to the fire. There isn't all that much hope that things may change. People aren't necessarily holding their breath, but it's a moment where potentially the burden could be lifted from those struggling the most.
Coletta, thank you very much. And with that, that is it from the Titanic Quarter in Belfast. And it's back to you, Jane, in the studio.
Rita, thank you. A man has gone on trial accused of plotting to kidnap, rape and murder the TV presenter Holly Willoughby. Gavin Plum, who's 37 and from Essex, is alleged to have developed an obsession with the star over a number of years. He denies the charges. Our correspondent Lizo Mazimba was in court.
Good morning and welcome to your Wednesdays this morning.
Holly Willoughby is one of TV's best-known faces, a presenter on ITV's This Morning for 14 years. It was during her final 2 years on the popular daytime show that the prosecution say that Gavin Plum was planning the presenter's kidnap and rape, and later her murder. The prosecution said Plum had initially spoken online with a man known only as Mark about his plans in 2021. It was alleged that the defendant told him, "I'm going to be living out my ultimate fantasy." Prosecutor Alison Morgan KC told the court it was not just the ramblings of a fantasist. The defendant had carefully planned what he would do. Later, the jury heard that Plum, who was present in court, was communicating online with another individual about his plans in graphic detail, and that he sought to encourage that individual to commit kidnap, rape and murder with him. The prosecution added that what the defendant didn't know was that the person was an undercover police officer based in the USA. The court was told that the 37-year-old security guard had a sexual obsession with Holly Willoughby and that he'd previously made kidnap attempts against other women, trying to force 2 women from a train under the threat of a gun and trying to tie the hands of 2 16-year-old girls at knife point. Any alleged victim of a sexual crime, like incitement to rape, automatically receives lifelong anonymity. In this case, Holly Willoughby has chosen to waive that. The prosecution also said that she would not be a witness, as the case was only concerned with Plum's planning, which they say was interrupted when his home was raided by police, followed by his arrest. The trial is expected to last 2 weeks. Gavin Plum denies the charges. Lisa Mazimba, BBC News, Chelmsford Crown Court.
Now a look at some other stories making the news here tonight. Lucy Letby has told a jury she has never intended or tried to harm any baby in her care. The former neonatal nurse is being retried over the alleged attempted murder of a baby girl known as Child K at a hospital in Chester in 2016. She denies the charge. A verdict couldn't be reached in the case last year when Letby was convicted of murdering 7 babies and attempting to murder another 6. The father of the missing British teenager Jay Slater says he's experiencing a living hell as the search for his son in Tenerife enters a second week. The search teams are working in challenging conditions at Rural de Teno National Park, which is the 19-year-old's last known location. An actor in one of the Pirates of the Caribbean films has died after being attacked by a shark while he was surfing. Tamayo Perry, who played one of the buccaneers in Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, died yesterday in Hawaii. The 49-year-old had worked as a surfing instructor and lifeguard for more than 10 years. Now, it's official. England have qualified for the knockout stages of the Euros without kicking a ball, after other results tonight ensured they'd go through, whatever the result of their final group game against Slovenia tomorrow. Our sports correspondent Andy Swiss is in Cologne this evening. Andy, England fans breathing a sigh of relief?
Yes, it's a bit of a strange one, Jane. Why are England through? Well, it's because Albania lost tonight, and that means even if England don't finish in the top 2 in their group, they will go through as one of the best third-place teams. Confusing? Well, one thing is for sure, England fans will be hoping for a much improved performance against Slovenia here tomorrow. England fans in Cologne out enjoying a cruise on the River Rhine, but after their team's stodgy start to the Euros, it's hardly been plain sailing.
We've got the best attacking players, I think, in the whole tournament, but we just haven't been using them right.
Having watched the first 2 games, you still feeling confident?
Oh, come on. That's a trick question. Yes, 100%. It will get better.
England were booed off by some supporters after last week's frustrating draw with Denmark, but they are still top of their group, and these fans are keeping the faith.
I think once they've scored, they go on the defence rather than the attack, and I think they need to change that side of things.
But you're still confident?
Oh, yeah. Southgate's got it, kid. No problem.
England haven't been short of critics, though. Captain Harry Kane says former players who are now pundits should be more supportive, but the manager says he's not bothered.
It's not important to me. There's nothing to be gained from us that's going to help improve us, listening to external criticism. We know what we've done well. We're very honest about that. We know where we need to be better. We're brutally honest about that.
Well, on paper, the match here in Cologne should be England's easiest of their group. Slovenia are ranked just 57th in the world, but so far in this tournament, not much has been straightforward. But it's been far harder for Scotland. After their agonising exit, they headed home this afternoon. England will be hoping their Euros journey still has plenty of mileage. Andy Swiss, BBC News, Cologne.
And that takes us to a look at the weather prospects. Darren Bett is with me. A hot day for a lot of people today, Darren.
It certainly was, Jane. The heat has been pushing its way northwards, and we saw temperatures really climbing across northeastern Scotland as summer arrived here. This is the picture earlier on in Aboyne in Aberdeenshire, where temperatures reached 27 degrees, the hottest day of the year so far in Scotland, also Northern Ireland and in England. Wales missed out, but temperatures reached 28 degrees in London, could get higher here in the next couple of days. But Scotland and Northern Ireland will be cooler tomorrow. We've got cooler, fresher air trying to come in from the west with some showers, but the heat and humidity will linger for longer across England and into Wales. And heading our way into tomorrow morning, we've got more sunshine for England and Wales. This cloud in the west should tend to break up a bit. There's more cloud developing in northern England that could give us a few showers over the Pennines. Looks mostly dry but rather cloudy in Northern Ireland, and some patchy rain or some heavy showers in the east of Scotland later on in the day. Temperatures are going to be lower in Scotland, but we still could make 22 in the central belt and the southeast. 19 degrees is more likely, I think, in Northern Ireland. Hot weather through the Midlands towards the southeast of England. Temperatures could reach 30 degrees in London. Pretty hot. More sunshine more widely for England and Wales on Wednesday. A little bit of cloud coming onto the east coast this time. Bit more cloud for Scotland, but fewer showers, and more sunshine is likely to come into Northern Ireland ahead of some rain. That'll give the temperatures a bit of a boost here, but again, it's hotter for England and Wales, and again towards the southeast of England, temperatures could reach 30 degrees. Things change though by the end of the week. This low pressure will push this weather front in from the west, and it's all about the timing. There's not much rain on that at all, but there is cooler, fresher air that's coming in from the Atlantic, pushing all that heat and humidity away from the southeast eventually and into continental Europe. Jane.
Darren, thank you very much. And that is it from the team for tonight. Now let's join our colleagues for the news wherever you are. From all of us, good night.